Hello and welcome to In Conversation with CCW Europe. My name is Kira Martin, Event Director at CCW Europe, and I'm joined here today by Jen Brown, Senior Director for the EMEA region with GoTo, and Nicola Millard, Principal Innovation Partner for Digital with BT. Ladies, hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to the studio. It's really good to see you both. How are you?
Good, thank you very much.
Doing
Good.
well, thank you.
Fantastic. So just with all of our guests, it'd be great if we could start by you telling us a little bit about you, your background and what you do. Jen, maybe we'll start with you if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kira. Okay, so worked in technology companies for my entire career, particularly SaaS organisations. Worked across marketing and solutions consultancy, but just always had a very, very keen interest in customer experience. So it makes sense that I'm now working at GoTo, formerly LogMeIn.
Thank you. Nicola?
So, I used to be BT's futurologist, which is an exceedingly silly job title, and always
The best.
Well, I always have a love-hate relationship with it because everyone always asks you the same question, which is, do you have a crystal ball? And the answer is yes, I do. I saw no future in it though, no, I'm slightly more boringly known as a principal innovation partner. So I'm part of BT's innovation team. Our team is kind of responsible for, I guess, just trying new technologies out. I'm a slightly weird part of that team because I am half a technologist. I'm not sure if it's the colourful top half or the slightly less, well, it's more boring bottom half, but the rest of me is a psychologist. So my role is to really understand the most disruptive part of innovation, which is, of course, not the technology, it's us. Where better to do that than in contact centres, which is where I spent most of my career. In fact, my PhD is also in contact centres, so I am that geeky. Really, my role is to try and understand customer behaviours and then sort of smash customer behaviours in with innovations, test stuff out, do research, do proof of concepts, try and understand what's on customers' minds, really.
Fantastic. Sounds great. So we're here today to talk about the use of remote video customer support tools to drive first contact resolution.
Well, I think the first myth to bust, as it were, is that we're not just talking about video and camera sharing. We're talking about screen sharing and actually being able to interact with the device that the end user is using. So this is about resolution, not just about talking to people remotely via video. For example, if I've got a meeting with my bank manager remotely, then that will be a very secure but a video conversation. That the myth busting here for the contact center industry is that this is about seeing it and solving it, and it's the power of being able to do that visually rather than relying on audio. So if we think about it, most of us are visual learners. I definitely am. I think something like 65% of the population learn visually. And if you think about how much information we can take in with all of our senses, being able to see something and solve it is so much easier than doing it audibly. If you imagine, like, if you're contacting BT or any other telecoms organisation, how hard is it when you're trying to get something solved with your router or your router? I work for an American company. It's hard if you ring up to solve a problem, and first of all they're like, okay, can you go to the browser 192.168. No, thank you. I want to be able to resolve that visually by being able to share my screen with somebody that has the expertise to solve my problem and help me for the future so that I can solve it myself the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. So there are, as you both know, multiple different benefits to using this technology. So just as an example from an accessibility standpoint, I know from my mother-in-law that's a professional sign language practitioner that 1 in 5 adults in the UK are deaf or hard of hearing. So that's 12 million adults in the UK. We've obviously got the Consumer Duty Act coming into play in the UK next year, which is all about fair and viable service for everyone, but also about creating more protection and support for vulnerable customers too. So it would be great if you could both talk us through some of the benefits to using this technology. And also, how is this empowering customers and agents that maybe aren't able to access traditional customer support methods in the same way that others do? Maybe we'll start with you, Nicola.
Sure. I mean, I think in terms of accessibility, obviously one of the advantages now of video, if we start to layer video with things like AI, we can actually auto caption things for a start. So we can do. Sometimes it gets it horribly wrong, but at least it does generate something that if we can have lots of conversations. Actually, the benefit of that as well is you can start to document the conversation, which given we have this thing around customers in crisis, and if you are in crisis and you're stressed or you're angry or frustrated, which you frequently are when you're contacting customer service, you're not always listening either. So actually having a record of the conversation is an advantage that you can send to the customer afterwards, or they can keep for reference. So I think there are advantages around sort of using video to document things like that. In terms of things like accessibility, I mean, one of the big advantages certainly that we found was, particularly during the pandemic, actually, if you can start to diagnose a lot more remotely, you don't need access to customers' premises. Now, during COVID, it was very difficult. If something went horribly wrong, getting someone into someone's house was a real problem. So actually being able to do things a lot more remotely, access things more remotely, meant that we could actually solve problems for people wherever they happen to be perfectly honest. And then absolutely, there is a lot that we've been doing around, for example, access to expertise. One of the classic ones at the moment, came kind of influenced by COVID, was medical expertise. So we know that there aren't enough medical practitioners around. They are quite rare. And actually, again, being able to access them over video means that you're not reliant on people in the same geographical area. Doesn't replace obviously face-to-face medical care, but if someone is actually having a problem and they're given the option of maybe 2 to 3 week wait for a professional medical person, or potentially instant access to somebody over video, they'll probably choose the video access.
Absolutely. And Jen?
Yeah, I mean, from a sustainability perspective, I mean, this means that we're able to reduce people's carbon footprint, doesn't it? We don't have to travel across the country now to resolve customers' queries. We can still be personable because it's video based, and we can still demonstrate empathy and demonstrate listening skills, whilst also reducing the amount that we're getting into vehicles. And I think that is. It's really positive when you're able to get two wins, isn't it? That you can do something that's right for the world and deliver exceptional customer service. I think that, but when you don't use video engagement and screen sharing to drive first-time contact resolution, though, I think that's where, Nicola was talking about, that's where it can lead to frustration.
Right.
And that's the limitations of audio-based customer experience, isn't it? So I think this gives us, remote-based support with video gives us the best of both worlds.
Fantastic. So what sort of customer challenges can this technology support in solving, and what are some of its applications today? Maybe Nicola, I'll go back to you if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm going to quote some stats, which I'm going to get my mysterious little notepad out because I can't remember stats. But this is actually brand new research that we've done on customers. So we very regularly publish something called the Autonomous Customer, which is a global piece of research asking all sorts of questions.
I actually love that.
It's a great piece. I'm always very excited when we publish it because it's always, firstly, I'm a data geek, so I wade through masses of data and get very excited, but I am quite sad. But we did ask questions about video and exactly what customers would like to use it for. So interestingly, 67% of people said that they'd like to be able to share their smartphone camera live in order to get somebody from customer service to help. So that's very high for a start. So that's certainly one big application, I think. Slightly lower, 44%. I talked about medical earlier. So 44% said they'd like to speak to a doctor or another health professional using video. We've got 38% saying that they'd like some advice to fix technologies or services. So again, to what you were talking about. 36% showing a mechanic a problem with a car, a motorbike or a bicycle. So very practical stuff around what do I do? I've got a chain that's fallen off. How do I put it back on? 29% are saying they want to discuss things like financial services. So whether that's mortgage advice, loan advice. And we've seen that grow as a niche in some of our banking clients. And I think along with the rise of those video doorbells, we're also getting 29% of people saying that they'd like to discuss where to leave a package.
Is that
Interestingly
right?
enough, I just got a little, just before this session, I got a little ring on my Ring doorbell asking exactly that question: where should I leave this? So yeah, we're getting all sorts of multifaceted things that we can potentially do. Customers are very willing to do in order to give them a better service, effectively.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. Thanks, Nicola. And Jen?
Yeah, my mind goes back to when we were selling our house last year and we were trying to get quotes for removal. We actually did it by video, like showing
Right.
somebody round, like, can you just hold the camera there? Can you just hold your phone there for a minute so that I can see, how many pieces of furniture and how many boxes are in that room? When I think about it, though, like practically from a remote support perspective, as well as solving technical issues as well. There's been instances where I'm going through, perhaps complex e-commerce flows. I recall one experience where I was trying to solve an issue with an airline. I won't name what airline it was, because the customer service agent said, "I'm very sorry, but this has come to the end of my 15 minutes and I'm not allowed to stay on the phone with you any longer." And at that point, my family, including my 2 children, were not sat together. And I have a child with special needs, so there was no way that he could be sat in a different part of the plane to us. And it took me 3 telephone calls trying to explain what I could see on screen that was different from what they could see on screen. The frustration is coming through in my voice, even reliving it. And it would have just been so much simpler if I could have shared my screen and say, "Look, I'm not seeing the seats that you're seeing in your system." It took another 25 minutes for it to update so I could see what they could see. And a big sigh of relief, and my husband passed me a glass of wine.
Sounds like a good husband.
Real story.
Fantastic. Great. So can you tell me then, why would businesses not choose to do this rather than using traditional conference video tools?
Yeah, I mean, video conference tools are great for a whole, stack of practical reasons and to facilitate collaboration. But, remote support is sensitive stuff. Nicola mentioned about the banking examples. I'm talking about things that are to do with my family, and when I'm traveling, this needs to be secure. It needs to be automatically recorded. It needs to connect into other solutions. There's a whole raft of security, user experience, and agent control facilities that need to be added in to ensure that this is secure. Never mind top of the range encryption to make sure when that's both the session itself and then when data is at rest. So it's very, very important actually that organizations don't settle for using video conferencing. And actually make sure that they get the right solution to resolve technical customer queries remotely.
Absolutely, that's right. It sounds as though this goes way beyond just being a simple 2-way FaceTime call and is actually rooted in better customer solution finding.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other practical things that are needed is annotation. So being able to mark up and point to customers, and this again, first time contact resolution is not just about satisfying the customer in that moment and making sure that their problem is resolved. It's also about helping them so that 2 weeks later they don't call back with the same issue.
Absolutely. So I would love to ask a question about more of the technical side. So Jen, maybe you won't mind if I direct this one towards you again. From a technology infrastructure perspective and from the perspective of upskilling agents, what is needed on that side in order to implement this technology?
Well, the good news is this is not a long, complicated answer.
Hurrah. This is good.
So basically what you need from an infrastructure point of view is sufficient bandwidth. Okay, always not sometimes easier said than done, but sufficient bandwidth and a compliant browser. And actually, the remote support software shouldn't get in the way. It should enable the agent to use it seamlessly so they can focus on what is going on in the window or in the video stream, so that they can focus on all of the skills that they need to show empathy, listening skills we mentioned earlier. You were talking about, you might have customers in crisis who are perhaps not listening that well over a telephone call, and that agent can focus on them and focus on their issue rather than worrying about the technology that's there to support it. And by the way, as I mentioned with the browsers, no download required. So it should work across multiple platforms, whether that's Mac, Windows, whether that's a mobile device or a tablet. It really shouldn't matter what the customer is using and where. I like the way that my colleague puts it. This is delivering remote support on the customer's terms.
So Nicola, I know that BT were really one of the pioneers in implementing this back in the pandemic when you weren't able to get engineers into people's homes. What sort of return on investment have your team seen as a result of this? How has it positively impacted customer experience? And were your team actually able to measure the effectiveness of this tool compared to more traditional support channels?
So I guess my main involvement with this was actually way before the pandemic, when we started to look at, actually, to be honest, we're always guided by that autonomous customer data. Mm-hmm. So we started to see video get its little niches, and customers, things like medical help and financial advice, we could see that was getting a niche. We knew, obviously, there's a very high stat around technical stuff as well, for obvious reasons. People just want their problems solved, to be perfectly honest. So we did a number of trials around various video technologies. Certainly one of the ones that was the most eye-catching, I think, was the one where we were just using the customer's smartphone. Mm-hmm. So what we could do was to, obviously with the customer's permission, we could take control of both the camera and the light on the smartphone. So basically, for things like broadband diagnostics, frequently what happens is someone sets the broadband up and they just plug the wrong thing in. And
probably
then
people like me.
Well, and me, to be perfectly honest. But you know, the problem then is if you can't get your broadband working, typically previous to that, what you would have had to do was ring customer service, get an engineering appointment. The engineer would maybe turn up in 2 to 3 weeks and go, yeah, you've got the wrong thing plugged in. And it's a 2-minute job. So what we were looking at was, could we use that kind of technology to actually just make sure that we didn't have to do that? So what we can then do, what we can do is actually allow the customer to show us what they've got plugged in. We started to do things like AI overlay, so we could use pattern recognition, because, to be honest, it's all standard wires and sockets. So you can start to auto label stuff, and obviously the customer can show you what they've got plugged in, and the agent can do screenshots. Yeah, they can annotate things, make sure that the customer has actually got the right thing plugged in, test it. So from those proof of concept trials, what we found was it cut down engineering appointments by about 60 to 80%.
Right.
So there's a double whammy there. Firstly, we solved the customer's problem right first time. They got their problem solved. From our perspective, it saved us a lot of money, because actually, if we do send an engineer out, it's quite expensive. So you've got that double whammy of increased customer satisfaction. Certainly things like our net promoter score went up,
right,
whenever we did that. So customers tended to recommend us more, because it was an easy solution to their problem. And from our perspective, it reduced costs significantly, because we didn't have to send the engineer out in the first place. And that's why, I mean, always with innovation and proof of concepts, it's the business case that kind of kills it. Obviously, it didn't kill it. It was a very positive business case that was then taken forward by the business.
Fantastic, glad to hear it. So it sounds as though there are a ton of benefits to implementing this, but still at this point, there isn't much widespread adoption of this across businesses. Why do you think that is, and how can we break down some of those barriers to adoption? Maybe Jen, we'll go back to you to start.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something Nicola said, like that ROI and that business case is really strong. And what we see with BT and many of our other customers is that they are saving huge sums of money by being able to solve things remotely. This is what I meant about a win-win. The customer gets the resolution quicker, and the organization spends less money achieving that resolution. And now in an era where we've gone through a situation, where I've been on video conferencing to do a remote quiz with my family. Times have changed, and I think that we are beginning to see more and more adoption. We're certainly seeing that at GoTo, because people are more willing to engage in visual-based customer service than they ever were before. But it's still, the market use of it is still much lower than I would have anticipated. I think there are many companies still relying on AI bots, and chats, or Audible. And I'm not saying that they don't have their place, but it's a bit like myself as a marketeer. I will use multiple channels to reach our audience, and we need to use multiple channels to serve our customers. In other words, we need to go where our customers are, not expect them to come to us or to wait for us to arrive.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And your thoughts, Nicola, please.
Well, I think the pandemic did change things, I think, in terms of the use of video. Some things have not changed. Certainly expectations of customer experience didn't change a lot. It was high, it stayed high. That's coming out again in the stats. But I think in terms of video adoption, because video was always the next big thing, and that was for years. I think I worked about 20 years ago in our video team, and it was always the next big thing. It suddenly became the next big thing because it was the way that we were living, certainly during lockdowns. And to your point, Jen, around quizzes and family meetings and all sorts of things went onto video. So I think customers' acceptance of actually using it, they've got a lot more comfortable with it. That said, it doesn't need to be used for everything. And as I said, I think there are significant niches where it does add a huge amount of value. So it's not that it's going to take every channel over, particularly when there is a visual component to the task. I think video can add an awful lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're never going to get any phone calls ever again. So I think it's really trying to identify those very powerful business cases where it does make a significant difference for customers in terms of getting them to their goal.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I think by the sounds of it, the first step is getting more widespread adoption of this. But since you're our futurologist in the room, I can't help but ask, looking at all the potential that this technology has at the moment, where do you see its future applications going, and what could be the potential for customer management in the future with this?
So, I mean, the big one's the metaverse. I mean, I always say that my innovation credentials would be revoked if I didn't mention AI and the metaverse. And I mentioned AI earlier, so that's that one ticked off. The metaverse, I think, is an interesting one because we're kind of in... I don't know whether we're in a trough of disillusionment or a hype cycle on metaverse at the moment. 6 months ago, I would have said it's hyped. I think a lot of the tech companies are now maybe in a bit of a trough. But again, our autonomous customer data, I'm going to take a prompt out again. We asked about the metaverse and what customers thought it could be used for. So 45% of customers thought the metaverse might be quite useful for receiving support to fix technologies. 44% thought it might be good for technical setup. 42% receiving directions to fix a product. Flat pack furniture was the one that we actually did. So that I mean, I think the metaverse, obviously it's science fiction at the moment. The true metaverse. I think what we're starting to see are baby steps towards the metaverse. So whether it's something like a digital twin, which is possibly one thing you could use in order to walk people through things. Again, it's a visual help. That could be through a pair of glasses, of course, or it could be holographic, or it could be in a virtual world. We don't know. That's all a bit futuristic. I think nearer term, we're actually running quite a lot of trials that are taking baby steps towards the metaverse, but are using some of the access points. So augmented reality, for example, I think is a really interesting one. This isn't strictly customer support, although it kind of is. But one of the most exciting things we've been doing is actually augmenting a paramedic with an augmented reality headset. So basically, they've got a headset on, it's got a camera, it's broadcasting live, high definition, real-time video back to a clinician with a headset on. So literally, the clinician can see through the paramedic's eyes. The fun part is the clinician also has a joystick.
Wow.
Now, this joystick drives a haptic glove that the paramedic is wearing. So literally what the clinician can do is guide the paramedic through procedures that they wouldn't be able to do unsupervised. So the trial on that one, the objective is to reduce hospital admissions and solve patients' problems. But so you can kind of see that's an extreme example, but you can kind of see applications of that in maybe not quite such extreme circumstances as well, as to a remote expert can work with a frontline person to actually solve issues. And what that effectively does is start to break down that distinction between front office and back office. And I think that's an interesting one operationally as well, around how can you start to enable people to do things that they can't do unsupervised, but actually have a remote supervisor talk them through to solve customers' problems.
It's phenomenal. Really exciting stuff. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I've loved the conversation. I love your energy on this topic, and just hope to see you at a future event or podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keir.
Thank you. Thanks for watching today's episodes of In Conversation with CCW Europe. If you'd like more information on the future episodes, then please click the link in the bio.